for us, it's very much about solving the complexity of records where users create, manage, and use records over those different locations. We do have quite a number of customers now around the globe on the platform, and there are 4 key things they tell us about the platform that are reasons that they've made the investments in using RecordPoint as their records management platform of choice. The first is around usability. RecordPoint as a solution, and including the file share connectors, the FileConnect capability we'll look at today, has really been targeted at creating as usable a solution as possible, focused on really making records management an automated process happening behind the scenes so that the average user can worry about getting on with their own job, not the process of records managing information when it occurs. So you'll see very much our case studies and the commentary from our users out there is that RecordPoint really is a system that people don't necessarily even know is installed, and that's very much the goal of RecordPoint, is to create records without having an administrative burden. We do this by automation. The key capability of RecordPoint is our rules engine. Our rules engine allows us to integrate to a file plan and then capture and automate the records management policy through very simple methods of metadata analysis or keyword analysis on that content. It really means that we're managing and capturing the information throughout its life cycle, and then ensuring that we can carry out disposition of all content, no matter what type it is or how it's created or even what system it's in, so that you don't have to worry about it in any manual form or any other processes. It's really one system to rule all the other systems within your catalog of record systems that are within your enterprise. We've also focused on lowering the total cost of ownership associated with these systems. Traditionally, these systems have been very expensive to implement and very expensive to run. RecordPoint really leverages the investments you've already made in the Microsoft stack so that you can not have to repay for functionality you have and just have the core capabilities within the records platform. And the last tenet that customers tell us is one of the key reasons that they love RecordPoint is that it is really about compliance anywhere. RecordPoint doesn't care whether we're managing a list item in SharePoint, a document in SharePoint, a document in Office 365, or in the case today, a document sitting inside a file share somewhere inside a network drive, so that we can have our rules set up, manage content from any of those locations, and then work with that content over time as a series of records. The key interfaces or the key screens that the average user in a RecordPoint system would see is really this idea of 2 views and no compromises. On the left-hand side, we have a standard SharePoint site where the Acme Corporation is developing some HR policy, and the business user there from the human resources team is able to look at those policies, work with those policies. You'll see if you can read the screen there that some of them are under legal review and need to be processed in particular ways. But there's no records management metadata there. There's no processes that are interrupting the user's workflow away from the core business behaviors they need to do inside of SharePoint. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have the records browser, which is looking at exactly the same information. The information is managed in place, and the records then on the right-hand side show their records management metadata. They've been processed by rules and then displayed in their context within the file plan. So it really means that we can have a business user view, the one on the left-hand side, and a records management view, the one on the right-hand side, of the same data, irrespective of location. Now, the demonstration we're going to see today takes this one step further, where we can have the content, rather than living in SharePoint, living inside the file share and the network drive, yet displayed in the records management browser so that we can see it inside of the file plan. There are a number of key features to the product that really align very closely to the ISO standards and the DoD standards. So at its very heart, RecordPoint uses an advanced rules engine. We'll talk about that in some detail shortly, but we also include our centralized dashboard our ability to build and manage the file plan and classification scheme, the ability to set up retention schedules within that process, the ability to manage a formal disposal and disposal approval processes so you do have defensible disposal occurring, the ability to run eDiscovery and holds, whether that's integrated with the Microsoft eDiscovery Center or just using the capabilities that RecordPoint provides out of the box. Both are options and extensions of each other so that you can run true eDiscovery and exports and those sorts of processes. And that includes just general exporting and importing. So we have additional capabilities that are difficult out of the box in SharePoint or in Office 365 to allow you to export and import that data and manage that information over time. Alongside that, we have our long-term preservation and archiving capabilities with our paper records so that you can still manage files, boxes, paper records, and assets within your organizations that are in a physical form. That extends out to barcode management and RFID management should you need to include those capabilities. We also have our document ID and permalinking service such that the content we're going to look at today that's living in the file share or the network drive can be permanently linked via an ID. And that ID will live with that document no matter where it's moved to and how it is managed over time. So that information is a key capability across different platforms. So we have the permalinking and the ID linked to that object no matter what. We have our retentioning and our lifecycle controls that enable complex multi-phase lifecycle management, and alongside that, the security and governance capabilities so that each item is individually given a security profile and you can add additional roles to that no matter what you're trying to achieve. So within that platform, you have a number of the key features that make RecordPoint one of the world-class records management systems out there on the market. Now, last but not least, I mentioned before, we also have our social records capability, which allows RecordPoint to integrate into Yammer, Facebook, and Twitter and manage content out of the social graph. But today we're going to look at our FileConnect file share capabilities. It's worth bearing in mind that the key thing that makes RecordPoint work at its very heart is the rules engine. So when a piece of content is added to a network drive or to SharePoint, as per this slide, the rules are going to decide how that particular content is going to be managed. I'll show you some examples of how that works in the demonstration shortly, but the key is that those rules add the retention controls and the mapping to the entity in the file plan that this particular content is going to be added to and therefore managed throughout its life cycle. It's within those rules that RecordPoint is able to manage the content. Now, having said that, you can override these rules at any time. So a user can manually classify. An administrator can reroute that classification. So whilst those rules are there to automate and make things easier, they're also not there to get in the way. So you can do things manually, post a declaration, and manually classify information if necessary. Now with RecordPoint, things do come in two flavors these days. We have our on-premises capability, which is SharePoint and RecordPoint, which you can deploy within your own data center and manage those records within that process. We also have our Records 365 offering, which we launched to market a number of months ago. So you're able to manage, again, records managed content, same features and functionality that we've been speaking about, but do that completely in the cloud as a SaaS offering. So Records 365 can be hooked up to Office 365, and you've got the capabilities there to manage the content in Office 365 with the same level of compliance and authenticity of that you would have on premises. Now, to focus on the key areas today, our connector suite comes in three flavors working with those two products. We have our 365 Connect, which allows you to run Office 365 in hybrid. It in fact connects the on-premises edition of RecordPoint to the cloud. So that is the hybrid mode capability. With our Social Connect capability, managing Yammer, Facebook, and Twitter, and so you can capture records out of the social graph. But today we're going to focus on the FileConnect capabilities, which allows us to manage information inside of a network drive or file share, apply records control to that content in the network drive or file share, and give you the power to manage that as if it was a record inside a SharePoint. When we built the FileConnect product, we worked very hard with a number of beta customers, and those customers told us there were some very basic things that they needed in order to be able to manage content in file shares as formal records. They needed a marker to decide what was a formal record and what wasn't a formal record. They needed a way to manage non-records via policy so that those could also be disposed of. And they needed a way to archive and finalize content or freeze that content that is being managed as formal records. So really the FileConnect product gives you the capability to ensure compliance over your file share and network drives by allowing you to define what are records, how those should be archived and finalized, and how non-records should be treated and how they should be disposed of. So within that process, there are four main features. The compliance elements, being able to capture that content, manage that content through its life cycle. The ability to manage disposal, delete and remove content that is no longer in use or is no longer relevant to the organization based on your file plan rules and your retention rules. And then the ability to archive and finalize content that may be held permanently or held for a very long time throughout these processes. It also, within that construct, ensures that records that are formal records cannot be deleted from the file share if they're managed in place. So those were the four key things customers really fed back to us with their needs around managing information inside the file share and network drives. Why use FileConnect? Well, really, to us, what we've seen with customers is that records are being stored and created in weird and wonderful places throughout the enterprise. And in order to manage this information without having to do bulk migrations of content into SharePoint or Office 365, we wanted to provide customers a way that they could map their pre-existing network drives and file shares into the retention controls that RecordPoint already has. So using FileConnect, you can take a file share, locations where there's lots of legacy data, allow RecordPoint to analyze that data, and then bring that data in as formal or informal records, and then manage the life cycle associated with it. What organizations are seeing is they're now able to reach and manage content sources that previously were unavailable. So most of the other systems on the market don't allow you to reach out to the file systems and manage them as an additional content source in the way that RecordPoint does. It also means that we can ensure that the record standards inside our organization have been met no matter where the content is. It doesn't matter that they're in a file share or network drive, there's just another content source to RecordPoint. How does it work technically? Well, FileConnect is a small service that runs on your file servers and looks for events such as create, edit, or updates, and it also ensures that content cannot be deleted, and then based on the rule sets inside of that service, will submit content into RecordPoint. That goes through the rules engine, manages the retention of the records, and applies the good record keeping policies that RecordPoint already does for SharePoint and Office 365. It's a very simple process where those services are just continually monitoring new or additional changes to that content, and then ensuring that anything that meets the rules around what is a record and how that record should be managed can be met through the lifecycle stages within those processes. What's the FileConnect architecture? FileConnect allows you to submit records from any of your file share or network drives mounted within your network. So long as they're on your same Active Directory, they can have the service added to them, and then via the RecordPoint web services, content is able to be pushed through, and RecordPoint's then able to manage that. There is a number of stages in the life cycle though. So within that service, we can define what the rules are for records and non-records, and whether or not those records should remain on the file shares or be archived into the SharePoint RecordPoint system. That really comes in two flavors. So the ability to archive, meaning that the content will be moved to RecordPoint and then managed through its life cycle. A stub or a pointer is left in the file share location so that at any point in time, a user can click on that stub or pointer, get a read-only copy of the document, and work with that document, irrespective of the life cycle that it's going through. When they want to save that document, however, it will create a new record, a copy of that record. So the one inside of the RecordPoint archive is the formal record and will live out its particular life cycle, and any copy of those records will live out a new life cycle. However, you may also want to leave in place and protect. So in this scenario, customers are looking for ways to leave the content in the file share, allow users to continue to work with that content, and then have it formally declared at a later point in time. So RecordPoint can manage that content in place, profile it as having the potential to be a record or in the non-record state, then apply the process for formal management at either declaration or at a predetermined policy point. So within RecordPoint, in the leave in place and protect mode, you can set an example of 100 days since last modification, automatically declare any records that hit a particular criteria. Those will then be archived and go through the archive process in addition to having been left in place and protected throughout their life cycle. With that, what I'd like to do is take you through a very brief demonstration to give you a flavor of how this works and what are the key capabilities. If you do have any questions at any time, please post them into the chat window and one of the RecordPoint team will address them straight away. And if we don't get to them in that process, we'll certainly address them at the end of the presentation. So I have a RecordPoint already set up. It's connected to a file share location. For those that are new to RecordPoint, this is what RecordPoint looks like. This is the dashboard within the system where we can see how many records are being managed, how many items, how many rules and patterns, and what are the processes that wrap around that. Now today we're going to focus on things primarily at a record level, just due to the brevity of the demonstration and giving you a good sense of how things work. So what we might do is just jump straight into the file share area and have a look at what the average user's experience would be working with content inside of their normal computer and desktop. So I've logged in here as an average user, and we're going to have a look at the most recent bills that have been presented for this fictitious ACME government department that are relevant to it for Congress to approve over the next sitting season. So this particular user needs to actually share this with the rest of his colleagues. Now, in this particular ACME corporation, they're a little bit backward. They're not using SharePoint for collaboration. They're in fact using network drives and shared drives to collaborate and manage content. So in this case, what we're going to do is put it onto the Z drive so that it is then available for all users to work with. Now, we have set this up such that when new content is added to the staff policies area, which is where we're going to publish our list of bills to be approved by Congress, they're automatically declared as records. So literally by going and hitting the save button here and saving it away into that network drive, and you'll see there wasn't that content there previously. If we just go and have a look at that on the Z drive, we will now have that particular bills.xls, which has been added to that network share, and that will now sync into RecordPoint. So RecordPoint should be looking to pick that up. There it is already. So the bills.xls has now been added into RecordPoint. So RecordPoint already had some of the pre-existing content that we saw in that network drive. If we just flick back screens to what the end user experience was, there was a budgets.xls, an executive update, an office photo, a policy, a presentation, and a Q&A document. Inside RecordPoint, we have the exact same information, but now presented in the records management view, so we can see when disposal needs to occur, we can filter it to an entity in the file plan, and all this has come off the network share. So in this case, we've got the office photo, the policy, the Q&A document, the presentation, the exec updates, the budgets, and the bills we just added. So that process means that that content's been profiled in. But if we go a step further and have a look at, well, what's actually been profiled into the file plan against these particular documents? And you'll see that I have two of those documents belong to the financial management category of the file plan. So these two documents have either hit a rule or been manually classified to that particular category. And they're both marked as destroy 7 years after the action associated with them is completed. based on the Acme's Corporation's retention rules. So these particular documents off the file share have been allocated a unique record ID and are now being treated as formal records within the solution. If we have a look then at the other records, those are living in the staff development area. So the staff development area contains the bills we just added, the exec update, the presentation, and the policy update. And that again has been driven by the rules that have been set up inside RecordPoint. So how did that occur? Same content from one location, however managed in two different ways via the rule sets. So if we just go back to financial management, we'll show you an example of how rules inside RecordPoint work and what the process is to do that. So if I go validate rule on my budgets.xls file, we can see what rules this particular item hit and what also it had the potential to hit. So in this case, it's hit the budgets rule, which has mapped us into the category 7 years after the actions completed around this particular budget process. And so if we have a look here, we'll see the pattern associated with it says anything where the file name has budget written in it. Now this is a real customer example that we worked with, where they had a formal titling structure for their records in the file share, and they would use the word budget whenever budgets were being prepared. So that capability has that mapping inside of it. Whereas the other rule that could have hit but didn't hit, and in fact has hit the other documents we're looking at, is a rule that's using the file path. So it's saying everything that doesn't have the word budget, in fact, because it's a lower priority process, is going to be processed as a policy because the folder path contains the word policy in it. So again, very simple sets of rules that have been created using the metadata and the information that is on the particular documents that we've been working with here. So it very simply allows us to work with a file share location, map that file share location into RecordPoint, and then from that file share location, the service is able to profile that using the rules to create ways to manage that within the file plan. The beauty of that is that to the end user, it's just a network share. I can go ahead and edit and change and work with my bills document, and that bills document will get updated and moved. Now, at some point, I may want to finalize the document here. I may want to say this is the final or declared version. Now, I can do that a number of ways. I could set that inside of Office, or I could also have it occur from the screen here, where it will say that if I finalize it, it'll prevent any further modifications, and then child items will be finalized also, and the archived content will be moved to RecordPoint. If you want to leave it in place, which you can do, you don't have to archive it, but there's the option there to archive it. So if I go ahead and archive that process, it's now going to go away and do that for me, and done. So that will now move to finalized, and that content is now locked and can no longer be managed in that form. So, sorry, can no longer be edited, my apology. So there are key capabilities here that allow you to then still work with your records, manage your records through their life cycle, and ensure they have the authenticity and control that wraps around them. Now, there's one other process here that's interesting to many users, and that is, well, it's all very well that things have been created by rule, but what if I'd like to manually classify this? What if I'd like to add it or change it to a different part of the file plan for some reason? Well, again, RecordPoint fully supports that in the file share, where I can come in, reclassify the information, and add it to the category or the file plan node that's relevant to where we want to take it to. So let's just assume we want to take this Q&A document, and instead of it being, let's assume we're doing something around the compensation policy rather than a general policy, we can manually go and update that. And so that item will now be 10 years after the action completed, rather than what it was previously, which was the was as a policy document and therefore was going to be kept for 65 years. And if we just refresh, we'll see that now updates. And so that particular document has now come through to 2025 rather than what it previously had on it. And so it now be managed through that particular life cycle being the 10 years from today being 2025. So again, very simple processes that allow us to manage our content from that file share, allow us to work with that content, and allow us to manage those processes. I can also go and manage a hold on the file share. So previously adding an item on a file share to a hold was very difficult. With the capabilities in FileConnect, we can go and create holds, just like adding a hold in any other part of SharePoint. I can then apply that hold to that item inside the file share. I can then, from the hold, run any discovery reports, do exports, do any of those processes, and it will pull out the content from the file shares themselves. Now, there's one other process that is really critical in our view, and again, the feedback from customers has been that this is really a game changer, where what I can also do is extract out the content of the metadata so that I can build patterns. So we're going to go and create a new pattern for our photo here, and what we can actually do is use the geo coordinates of this object from the system and pick that out of the fields that are available. So here are all the different metadata attributes from this particular photo that RecordPoint has automatically pulled out. And you can see there is quite a considerable number that we can choose from to build our rules on. And in this case, we might want to use the geo coordinates, or we could use some other things to derive the particular controls that are going to be placed on it. We could even use things like the white balance, for instance. And then based on that, we can use that particular category and we can process those photos. And the feedback we've had from people is that using that capability, they're very quickly able to build rules, customize rules, and do that from the content. And at any point, obviously validate the rule sets that are there. So that's the quick walkthrough of the file share capabilities using the FileConnect product. There's one other thing that I want to show you from a technical and architecture perspective, and it's very simple. All that RecordPoint installs in order to make this happen is the RecordPoint processor service running as a service on the file share server and the RecordPoint FileConnect service. Those two services are doing all the work in connecting up with RecordPoint, profiling this content, and pushing it through to be managed through its lifecycle. So it's a very lightweight implementation that has a very low touch on your file, on your network and file share servers, making sure that the content can be pushed through to RecordPoint at any time and then managed through its lifecycle. Now, with that, I wanted to very quickly show you the capabilities. So just go back to the slides rather, and take you through the last two connector series. We will be running some further webinars to explain these in greater detail, but don't forget we have the 365 connector, which allows the on-premises edition of RecordPoint, or Office 360, sorry, of RecordPoint rather, to apply records control to SharePoint or OneDrive from your on-premises instance. We also have the social connect capabilities using the social connector processes, managing information out of the social stream using Facebook, Twitter, and Yammer, and again, applying records control to that content. So really, to summarize, we have two products with two slightly different connectors that connect up. The FileConnect one is the one we focused on today, which will connect to either on-premises RecordPoint or Records 365 in the cloud connecting up to Office 365. And the Social Connect connector will also connect to those two products. So with that, I wanted to pause for any questions that you may have. We're always very keen to end these presentations on time, so we've given ourselves 10 minutes for particular questions that that might want to be posted. So if you want to post any questions into the chat session, we'd be happy to answer them at this point. Just to make it easier for people, I will also unmute or everybody here. So if you did want to ask a question over audio, you're welcome to also do so.
Muted. Unmuted.
Is there any questions from anybody?
Muted. Unmuted.
So no questions there. So look, one question has now popped up in the chat window. Let me see if I can answer that one. So one here from Jim, is it possible to apply rules to content in network drives without copying the content into SharePoint? Yes, it is, absolutely. The content can be left in place via the rules. However, you do need SharePoint in order for RecordPoint to run. So we can absolutely apply content rules to the content in network drives. We do not need to copy the content into SharePoint at all, but we do need SharePoint in order to run these processes, and the content can remain inside those network drives. Yes, thanks, Jim, and that was a great question as well. Great. Look, if anyone has any further questions, please post them and we'll go through. But here are my contact details. If you do want to direct any, I was going to have one of the directors join me, but he unfortunately wasn't able to make the call. But please direct any questions to myself, and I'd be able to answer those over email. If there's some, if you'd also like to do a much deeper dive demonstration of the FileConnect capabilities, or even just RecordPoint itself, please reach out to my contact details there, anthony.woodward@recordpoint.com. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have, or take you through a one-to-one demonstration. I'm based in Seattle, so happy to do that in whatever time zone suits yourself, and happy to take you through the products in whatever depth makes sense for what your requirements are. I really appreciate your time on the call today. There are some additional resources that we have on our website that talk about the FileConnect product and the capabilities here. This particular webinar was just a flavor to take you through the capabilities, and obviously we're happy to give you a much deeper dive demonstration at any time. If you want to reach out on any of the contact information I've provided, this webinar has also been recorded, and there'll be a copy of the recording made available along with the slides that we presented today. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate taking the 45 minutes out of your day. Is a fairly significant commitment based on how much we all have to get on with these days, and look forward to hopefully meeting many of you in person at some point in the future. Thanks very much.